But Teaneck had no kosher restaurants. So going to the YU Caf for dinner, that was a night out. That was a kosher restaurant. It wasn't that far away from Teaneck. That's where we went. It was a vintage of a Cohen. Yeah. And he said, you're in a hospital now. That's not your makom. That's not your makom. Your makom is here in the yeshiva. Your makom is here in the beis medrash. That's your makom. Run over here. Get over here as fast as you can. Never mind if you get a speeding ticket. I'll pay the speeding ticket. Speed back to the yeshiva. This is your makom. I do have a little bit of a Chassidish bent. If all else is equal, I'd recommend you go to Grush because you're not likely to meet somebody like Rabbi Lichtenstein anyplace else. Of course, to be close to Schechter, that's my main inspiration.
Hi, welcome to the Aseh podcast at Yeshiva University. My name is Yaakov Taubes, and I serve as an assistant director here at RIETS, and it's my pleasure to interview Moriah, my father, Rabbi Michael Taubes. I'll begin with a few questions about growing up, and you tell us where you're from and what the community was like when you were growing up.
So I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is today well known as a Torah community, Baruch Hashem, a real YU community. It was much different when I was growing up. It did not resemble the community that is today in any way, shape, or form. My parents moved there in 1960 when I was about a year old. Previously, they had lived when they got married. They first got married here in Washington Heights. And my father, Olav Shalom, I then started teaching English literature here in Yeshiva College, a position they held for over 4 decades. And they were living here in what my mother referred to as a married YU dorm, not far from the yeshiva. But through one circumstance or another, they ended up in Teaneck, New Jersey. They were not the founders of the Orthodox community there. There was a group of people that lived there that founded the shul congregation Bnai Yeshurun, which was the first shul in Teaneck. But I believe they were the first people, certainly one of the first people, to move in from the outside. And so at that time, there was a grand total of 1 Orthodox shul in Teaneck, New Jersey, and it was located in a house. And I remember it actually quite well because that's the way it was for the first number of years of my life. And the whole community at that time, 12, 15 families, something along those lines, that was the whole Teaneck. Now Teaneck is known as a hub in terms of kosher food establishments. I like to tell people that don't believe me that there was no kosher food available in Teaneck until I was a junior in high school. Okay, they could not get the food in Teaneck. As I mentioned, my father was a professor here in Yeshiva College, so on Thursday nights, before he came home, he used to go shopping here in Washington Heights to purchase food for Shabbos and stuff like that.
So the reversal of what it is now.
Yes, now it's
opposite.
I think it's the opposite. At that time, there was nothing available until when I was a junior in high school, pizza shop opened up. That was considered to be a big thing, kosher food in Teaneck. So it was very, very different. But that's where I grew up. Again, a very, very different community at that time. I attended Yeshiva Day School that's called Yavneh Academy. It still has the name today. Yeshiva's Yavneh. Today it's located in Paramus. At the time, it was located in Patterson, New Jersey, which then had a substantial Jewish community. And I was the only Yeshiva Day School in the area altogether. Starting when I was about 4 years old. When I started the kindergarten, I was on a bus for 45, 50 minutes every day from Teaneck because I went to a few different areas to pick up different kids, and I traveled to Yavneh. When I was in the first grade, Moriah School of Englewood, started much closer to home. But my parents wanted to wait and see what Mativo Shel Ubozeh was going to develop. So they didn't switch me right away. But after I finished the 3rd grade, Moriah was a little more established, and they switched me into Moriah starting the 4th grade. And I was in the oldest class. So each year they added a class. I was the oldest grade every single year and was therefore a graduate of the first graduating class in the history of Moriah at Englewood. So that was my elementary school education. Again, the whole time when I was in elementary school, Bnai Yeshurun was the only shul. Another shul, Beth Aaron, started just around that time as well.
Was Teaneck already a city that was considered associated with Yeshiva University, with the yeshiva?
In the sense that the rabbi of the shul, the one shul, and then when Beth Aaron started the second shul as well, at that time was a musmach of Yeshiva University. The community actually grew in the late 1960s, a little bit before my bar mitzvah, when a lot of YU guys who were learning in YU moved to the apartments. Teaneck has an area where there are apartments. My parents lived there as well. There's still people today. The apartment area, there are many more apartments now. But at that time, the apartment areas really helped the community grow because there were guys who were learning or they were in college, and really is very convenient by bus and by car to get to Washington Heights. And so people started moving out there. At one time, pretty much everybody who lived in Teaneck started out in the apartments, eventually bought homes, and that's how the community grew. So in that sense, it was a lot of YU people. But it wasn't particularly a YU community. It was, other than, as I said, it was headed by the rabbi, was a YU Muslim.
Mm-hmm. And for high school, you went to MTA.
So high school, I went to MTA. My ninth grade rabbi was Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen Shlita. People today won't believe it. He didn't have a beard in those days. And he had a tremendous influence on me, as he did on so many people, Baruch Hashem, over his career. Rabbi Cohen really drove us to learn. And I come, Baruch Hashem, from home, Shalom Shabbos home, where learning was valued. But as a high school student, I wasn't necessarily spending too much time, or planning to spend too much time. I was learning at night. But Rabbi Cohen used to drill into us. He pointed, you have to do chazar, you have to learn at night, you have to learn at night. And he would ask us in shir the next morning, did you learn at night? Last night, did you learn something last night? And, sometimes a guy answered, oh, yeah, I did. Rabbi Cohen said, what did you learn? Well, I looked at the Rashi. So I was, a bit of a scared ninth grader. So I started to learn at night because I was afraid he was going to call me. As simple as that. I was afraid that, the next morning he'd come and ask me, and I wanted to have something to say. And so that was a tremendous influence that he was, on my life in terms of commitment to learning and seriousness. He used to give late night Thursday shir and shir Sunday after regular shir
here
in
MTA.
It was voluntary. Mm-hmm. But I used to go. So he really got me excited about learning. So he was my ninth grade Rebbe. In the 10th grade, I had Rabbi Michael Hecht, who also at the time was one of the deans or pre-law advisor in the college. But he really introduced us to Rishonim in a methodical, organized fashion to see the Rosh, to see we're learning brachas, that you'll see Rabbi Yonah, and to go through Rishonim in a methodical fashion. And in 11th grade, I had the legendary Rabbi Leibel Dulitz, Zichron Bracha. Very colorful figure, very dramatic figure, and he really also had an influence on me because he just, peppered us all the time. He kept us on our toes. He wanted us to learn and to understand the Gemara. He was very, very much emphasized how to read the Gemara, where to put the period. And of course, he made us memorize. He was known for making us memorize lots of things. I had him for English in the afternoon as well. He taught Shakespeare in the afternoon. We had to memorize half of Macbeth and half of Hamlet, we had him third period. He taught 3 English classes. And there's a line in, I believe it's in Hamlet, which says, horrible, horrible, most horrible. That's he identified his 3 English periods. Horrible, horrible, and most horrible. We were most horrible. I learned a tremendous amount from him also. We learned Baba Kama, that you learned quite a bit of Gemara. And it was actually he who took me to the first shir that I ever heard from Rav Soloveitchik. The Rav used to give public shiurim from time to time on yard sites and so on in Lamp Auditorium. And Rabbi Dulitz brought some of the Talmidim who thought might appreciate the shir to come. I can't say that I followed everything, certainly not, but I still remember to this day that I recounted this recently to somebody. And I was sitting next to him. He was to my left, I was on his right. And every time the Rav quoted a pasuk or a Gemara, he elbowed me in the ribs and said, Taubes, where's that Gemara? Taubes, where's that pasuk? Sometimes I knew it, sometimes I didn't know it. If I did know it, he was very happy and very proud. If I didn't know it, he gave me a dirty look. But he had an influence on me as well. So I had really 3 wonderful years in high school and MTA. And at that time, they had an early admissions program with the college. So after I finished 3 years in MTA, I went to Yeshiva College. Rabbi Bronspiegel was my Rebbe. The first year I was in Yeshiva College, and the second year, Rabbi Parnas, Shlita, Shem Shasana B'Fu Shlema. Those are my rebbeim. Those are 2 very, very, very popular shiurim. There must have been at least 50 guys in each shiur or more. Very, very popular shiurim. So those are my rebbeim. In those days, changed later on. In those days, you didn't go to Eretz Yisrael right after high school. It was called the Junior Year Abroad. That was the official title. I think it started because secular colleges would have students would go over. Right, they would go overseas.
Yeah. Still
some kind of program, still do it. So that was the original Eretz Yisrael program, the Junior Year Abroad. So after my first 2 years in Yeshiva College, I was the age of the second year, because I'd go on early admissions, but I went to Eretz Yisrael, and at that time, I was debating whether to go. The choice boiled down to Karm Yavneh and Gush Haratzil. Those were the 2 popular places for Talmidim like myself, and I really couldn't decide. I had friends going to each, and I remember my father telling me that you have to go where you're going to learn best. You have to go where your chevra is, where you want to go. You should go where you're going to think about tzliach. I'm not pushing in any direction. He said, but if all else is equal, I would recommend you go to Gush because you're not likely to meet somebody like Rav Lichtenstein anyplace else. And that was one of the reasons was my career that I decided to go to Gush. And Baruch Hashem, because I'd been in Yeshiva, YU Shiur for 2 years already, I went directly to Lichtenstein's Shiurim, and it was just, absolutely marvelous. I became close with him, listened to Shiurim in the Yeshiva. He would give Motzei Shabbos, he gave Messiahs and Taras, being a volunteer, but I used to go. And I made it my business to get as close to him as I possibly could. On Fridays, there was no regular shiur in the yeshiva on Fridays, most yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, but he gave Chumash Ramban on Fridays. And sometimes he would go back he lived in Yerushalayim in those days, so he would go back from the yeshiva to Yerushalayim after this Chumash Ramban shiur. And he had a small car, but he fit about 5-6 guys in his car, and guys could trent, they could get a hitch back to Yerushalayim. And it was first come, first serve, called Kodem Zochet. So guys would run to get to the car. So if I had to go to Yerushalayim for that Shabbos, I would be one of the people who ran to grab the car. And even if I didn't have to go to Yerushalayim, I wanted to go in the car because I wanted to be part of the conversation, to hear what he had to say. If someone else had to get to Yerushalayim, I wouldn't take the spot if there's no one else going. And so I would sometimes go to Yerushalayim and get on a bus, go back to Yeshiva. But I just, had that relationship with him as tremendous influence in my life in terms of his clarity of thought, his organizational presentation, just somebody. And then he recommended that after I finished the year over there, it wasn't so popular to stay Shana Bet then. Some guys did. I thought about it, but one of the reasons I came back is because Soloveitchik, the Rav Zichron Livracha, was still giving shiurim here in YU, and it wasn't clear how many more years that was going to be. And Lichtenstein suggested I should go to the Rav Shir. So I went to the Rav Shir. And for the rest of my college and for the years that I was in Smichas, I was basically by the Rav for the last several years that he was the Rebbe here in the Yeshiva. And that was, of course, a unique experience.
What was Yeshiva like then in terms of same style? Obviously, morning Seder and Shir. Medrash was the old base Medrash,
yeah,
but
right.
a similar,
this
similar feel to it. And morning Seder and then lunch and then Shir and then classes.
Same schedule. The Rav had his own schedule.
Okay.
The Rav did not. When I was in Rabbi Brunswick, Rabbi Parnas, that was the regular schedule. You learned in the morning, and you had lunch, and you had Shir afterwards. 1 to 2:30, whatever exactly it was. The Rav used to give Shir, as I recall. It depends when he got here, because he was living in Boston. He came in my time. I think in the olden days he gave two days a week. In my time, he gave 3 days a week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And he would usually give around 11:30. So we were in the base Medrash that time in First Hall. It was the Kollel base Medrash at that time. So that's where the boys in the Rav Shir learned. That was our learning Seder room. And we learned there. And somebody would come in, one of the Shamash would come in, give us a clap, and the Rav would come. We knew the Rav came in. It was always an issue because he gave Shir in those days for 2.5 hours. And officially the calf closed at 2:00. And so he started Shir till 11:30, 11:45. Guys,
for lunch.
No place to get lunch. It didn't bother me so much, and I don't eat lunch that much often anyway. But whatever, that was always an issue. But to be by the Rav, it was a unique experience. I did not see the Rav at the height of his power. Okay, he was, he wasn't always so well. I remember actually one year, he didn't come back after Pesach because he wasn't well, and his son, Chaim Soloveitchik, took over. And he taught us Yerushalmi Trumas, which was...
He chose that. That was his decision.
I don't think the guys chose that. No, I don't think the guys chose that. In those days, he gave out all these Marmakomos, these obscure midrashim you had to look up and so on. So we joked that he must have had a deal with the photocopy company because we had to run to the library to get all these unusual svarim to photocopy to be able to prepare. So that was also a unique experience. But the Rav, what was exciting about the Rav, I guess, the Gemara says in the beginning of Erevin, around Daf Yud Gimel, I think, the Gemara mentions that Rebbe, the Girsa we have, it's Rebbe. I think so, one Girsa says Rav, but the Girsa we have is Rebbe felt what distinguished him, one of the things that distinguished him from others, is that he saw Reb Meir Machoroi. He saw Reb Meir from the back. It's a different interpretation of what that means, but perhaps it means he got a glimpse of Reb Meir. Maybe it wasn't Reb Meir at the height of his greatness, but he got a glimpse of Reb Meir. So that's how I feel to some extent about my experience, with the Rav. It was Machoroi. He was already not as well and not the same power that he had, in earlier days. And you read the stories and you hear from people who were there. But nonetheless, it was still the Rav and the brilliance and and the passion and everything which which the Rav stood for was still very much visible then, and I consider it chus when I saw the Rav Mecharai. One of the things I always like to relate, a personal story, because it just showed who the Rav was to me. I'll never forget this really. I had a shaila that I wanted to ask the Rav. The details are not important. And at that time, the Rav had an apartment. The apartment that he lived in was in the morgue dormitory, the first floor. And that's where he was in the morning when he was here. Tuesday, he came from the airport and pretty much came straight to Shir. Maybe dropped off his stuff and he came straight to Shir. And Thursday left, but the Wednesday mornings and Thursday mornings before Shir, he was there. I guess in the afternoons and evenings as well. People from all over made appointments to come see him. So I had a shaila and I made an appointment with one of the shamasim to come see him. Told me to come at such and such a time. And I looked into the sugya a little bit, what I was asking, because I didn't want to come in and look like a fool. I'm going to ask a question which, is so obvious and this and that. And in case there'll be some kind of conversation, I had some working knowledge of the of the topic, But I came into the room, it was my turn, they called me in. The Rav was sitting at a table, and there was what we call a TV cart, which had, not a TV, but it had a shas and a Rambam on it. He had a table, and he didn't have his jacket and tie. He was sitting just in an open white shirt. And when I walked in, he was kind of slumped over. And he looked absolutely terrible. And I felt that if I blew hard enough, I could blow him down. And I thought to myself, why on earth did you come with this shaila to him? It was not the type of shaila. The Baruch Hashem, we always had great Talmid Chacham in our yeshiva. There were other Rosh Yeshiva, there were other Rebbeim I could have asked the shaila. It wasn't something that I thought needed necessarily the Rav's insight. It was a shaila, it was important. But, I felt, what did I bother him for? I could have gone to somebody else, could have gone to Shechter, could have to somebody else and asked it. I felt terrible. So I just kind of quickly asked the question. He quickly gave an answer. I ran out of there. I just didn't want to bother him. I felt, and I don't know, maybe 45 minutes later, was Shir upstairs. In those days, again, the fourth floor, first hall. And I remember I came into Shir, and I absolutely couldn't believe that it was the same person that I just seen 45 minutes earlier, looking slumped over like he was just about to keel over. He was animated. I always give that example. It's Chaim Hil Machzikenbo. His life was giving shiurim and teaching Torah and so on. And I just was so stunned by the transformation that took place in those 45 minutes. And just it was a tremendous inspiration. Of course, a tremendous chus to be in the Rav Shir. Over the years, obviously, I've had the opportunity to read many things that the Rav has written, the Svarim that he wrote, the Talmidim wrote, and hear many things. And I consider it one of the great privileges of my life to have been asked to work on editing certain shiurim and certain insights of his. A number of years ago, a machzor was published with the insights of the Rav on Yavneh davening, Rosh Kippur. So I was very, very, very heavily involved in that, editing and so on and so forth. And there was also Siddur and other things, the Chumash, Masorah, a little bit I had a hand in that, less so, but I was involved in that a little bit in the Chumash Bereshis. And now recently, the Yeshiva here decided to publish some of the Rav Shiurim on Yom Tov Inyanim, called Bnai Yosef. And there's two parts. The first part is Shiurim from the Rav, and the second part is Shiurim from other Piskei Halach from other rebbeim Bnai Yeshiva. And so I was asked to write up the Rav's Shiurim, which I do based on some notes that I have and things that have been published elsewhere, other Talmidim and so on. And it's tremendous chus, and I like to quote the Rav as often as possible. Just last week was MTA, or work, I guess we were back then, at the dinner. I quoted my remarks. I quoted from the Rav, which I always try to do for selfish reasons. You can't go wrong. Okay, the Rav doesn't disappoint. So I have that tremendous. Of course, I told him, Kadosh Baruch Hu, that again, it was the last few years that he was here, but Baruch Hashem had that opportunity.
Was he giving swords? Did you know what shir was going to be out on a given day, or
we learned the Masech. Yeah. The Marmakom was not really. I mean, sometimes in the middle of Inyanim, you knew you had to look at the Rambam. That was the Rapashim. The Rav stuck to what's on the page. Right. More Rashi Tosis, some of the guys we shown him and so on and so forth. But I mean, he wasn't saying. The raid or whatever.
Wasn't quoting consensus.
No, not really. From time to time, maybe mention something, but but we learned different mistakes. One year we learned Orach Chaim, in the order of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, that was one year we did Orach Chaim, And I still remember when it came to Pesach, he did Chus Pesach in Orach Chaim. But the other years were regular Masechtas, and he said his Chidushim and so on. Again, not with the same power and the same passion, so to speak, well, visible passion they may have had in previous years. But as I said, it was, I've heard many stories from previous Talmidim about people tzittered, this and that, but it was a great privilege to remember him.
And so following smicha or during smicha, you're already starting to teach. Did someone encourage you to go in that direction, or just?
So the truth is, it's a good question. I don't really know. I was interested in learning, and I was in the Rav Shir. Actually, one of our other rebbeim, Rabbi Hashi Reichman, in those days used to give a shir on Monday nights in Teaneck, in the shul that I mentioned earlier. I was a little older. I was a Talmud Yeshiva. I was 20, 19, whatever.
But you weren't dorm. You didn't dorm.
No, I didn't dorm because I didn't dorm because I drove a carpool of guys from Teaneck, to New York, and so I didn't dorm. I was here a lot of times at night. I had my own car, so. But I didn't dorm. But on Monday nights, Rabbi Reichman.
Was parking as bad back then, or was it bad?
It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. There are no lots either. Very few lots. I got street park. In those days, you could double park during alternate side parking hours.
You were officially
it was mutter to double park. They wouldn't ticket you. You left the car there after the hour. I think it was 10 to 1, 3 hours. You got to figure out 11 to 2. I think 11 to 2 actually. Whatever it was, but it worked out.
Anyway, yeah.
So Rabbi Reichman came to some of the younger Balabatim who were Talmidim of YU, who are now married, living in Teaneck, invited Rabbi Reichman to come once a week to give a Lamdish shir. So I didn't particularly know him. I just knew he was a Rebbe in YU, but it was a high-level shir, so I enjoyed it. So I went, and I had a very warm relationship with him. He signed my ksuba, Rabbi Reichman, together with Rabbi Taubes. But I went to his shir for a number of years, and we learned Masechah Shabbos, a lot of Masechah Shabbos. And he always said over in the Rav, so that was also exposure before when I was just really starting the Rav Shir. I used to go to the Shir. It was one of the amusing stories was, I think they have before graduation, they have like an awards night, and then they present. So there were RIETS awards as well.
Yeah,
YP, still
have
it. So for some reason or other, I got one of the YP awards for excellence in Talmud. And Rabbi Chalap, as the dean at that time of YP RIETS, he presented. And apparently, none of the guys who got the awards were actually present, which I think probably happens now also.
That sounds familiar.
And somebody who was there, a friend of mine who was there, wasn't getting one of those awards, told me, Chalap said, these guys are not here because they're all learning. That's why they got this award. It happens to be, it was a Monday night. I really was learning. I'm not saying the other guys weren't, but I was because I was at a Rechman shir, so the night before I graduated. So that was
So you've been teaching.
Yeah. So again, when I was in Smicha, I did go to the chinuch track. At that time, they were with me tracks. I had a track.
Pulpit and the
chinuch and chaplaincy. That was the third track. I don't know if they still have
no Lake Kodesh track.
No, there was no Lake Kodesh track in those days. Those were the 3 tracks. So I was in that track. I was always interested in teaching. I'd been involved in youth work. I was the youth director in the shul. I was involved in NCSY when I was a student here in Yeshiva and so on. So I enjoyed working, and I thought I'd like to teach in high school. So that's what I did. And the first couple of years, I was learning. The truth is, I was in Rabbi Shechter's Kollel that time. And
while you're in Smicha?
Yes, I think, while I was in Smicha. And I think for a year after, I forgot about it, I think I was there 4 years. But I Baruch Hashem, developed very close with Rabbi Shechter, which I still have to this day. Baruch Hashem.
How did that come about?
So it just came about because I was around and I was a serious Talmud. And but I was never actually officially a member of the Kollel because I was not in his shir when I was in college. I didn't really know him in college, but I started to learn in the Kollel. I wasn't allowed to be a member because in those days, believe it or not, the Kollel stipend. I should explain today. The Kollel stipend was for single fellows. It was just $190 a month. That was the Kollel stipend. And because I had a job in NCSY, I was told that I was not allowed to get that stipend. So I was not an official member of the Kollel, even though I learned and I came Sundays.
Took the bechinners.
So I looked at the bechinners. I didn't submit the bechinners because that was my protest, whatever. But, my chavrusa was a regular member of the Kollel, so we did all that. I went to all the chaburas.
13 questions also.
Yeah, 10 out of 13, same thing. Yeah. And I went to all the chaburas. I still have notes, on the chaburas. And I developed a relationship over the years, over those years initially, and of course subsequently. So I was never actually officially a Talmud of his, but
You learn with him in the summer sometimes.
yeah. So that was actually after I was married, and after I was married, I still said so right to teach you because my first teaching jobs I only taught in the morning.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I came back to Hawaii to learn the Kollel in the afternoon. And I taught in the morning, and after I got smicha, I was a rebbe in the morning, and actually my first job was in Manhattan Day School, 8th grade, MDS. Rabbi David Kamenetsky was the teacher of mine when I was in elementary school, was the principal those days. He offered me a position. But then the following year, I was really more interested in high school than elementary school. So I taught in Frisch for a year, and then moved on to other teaching positions. But the first few years, I always taught in half a day, because I wanted to, those days, I guess I didn't need the money or whatever, the same way. It's a young family. My wife had a job, so I came into YU after teaching. I learned in the Kollel for those years. Again, not official member of the Kollel, but I learned in the Kollel. Those days, the Kollel was on the third floor. First floor, it was a whole Kollel. I don't know, now I think it's a JSS basement or something like that.
The Libuts used it for shear.
Right, whatever. So that was it. So actually, my first year was also in that room before they had the Gluck building. But that's where Shechter's Kollel was. That was the whole. That was the whole building, the whole Kollel. Maybe 25 guys. I don't know, not more. I still remember he used to post at the end of the year what Masechta we'll learn next year, so guys could vote.
I still have the sheet downstairs. They stick it in the back of the.
So I remember one year he offered Erevin. I thought, what a great! I'd love to learn Erev with Shechter. Okay, I am one other guy. The only people who signed up Erevin. And sometimes he didn't always follow the majority. Like he wanted to see what the thing was, but they made a tumult. I'm not entitled to a vote. I'm not an official member of Kollel. So, anyway, so we didn't learn Erevin. Okay, what can we do? But
you still ended up being involved in the Erev in Teaneck anyway.
Yeah. So willy-nilly somehow. There's another story. I was working once on translating an article that Rabbi Shechter had written on a land for peace. Translating to English for whatever purpose. And he came to my house after I didn't want to publicize the article. He saw the translation. It was during the summertime. So he came to the house and he'd been brought out because the rebbeim of the community, which I was not yet one at that time, I was a balabas, wanted him to see the Erev. So I asked him what saw the Erev. He goes, well, there's this problem, that problem. I go, oh no, So I showed him the article. Fine, the article was fine, but I asked him what needed to be done to fix the Erev to the standards. And I remember I wasn't a rabbi in the community then, but I went to the other rabbanim and I would objectify. He made these and these horas. Would you objectify? Work on my own expense, so I get some other people, and that's how I started to get involved in the Teaneck Erev. Right around then, Rabbi Neuberger, who was a few years older than me, but we overlapped in the Kollel. He was a I don't remember being the Rav Shia with him. Maybe he was, but he was in the Kollel. I think he was learning a few years ahead of me. Or Rosenzweig, also they were in the Yeshiva a few years ahead of me. Anyway, Renewberger just took over the shul in Bergenfield, and I spoke to him. So he was behind us, and we worked it out. So ever since then, I've been one of the head people involved in the Erev Teaneck. As one of my daughters, your sister, likes to say, she always told the sons, "Don't get involved in the Erev." That was but that's a Baruch Hashem. But you mentioned about, so that's how I got involved in teaching. I did learn one summer of a Shechter. My wife was expecting, not you, but one of the other babies before you. For some reason, Rabbi Shechter was didn't go to Tanazul, and he wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. He was learning here in the white base medrash, and he sat down. It was the old base medrash. He sat down, and he had a Gemara, and whoever wanted to come sit and listen could come sit and listen. Isn't it? So I came, sat, and listened. So we learned from 9 to, I think, till 2:30, till mincha. Maybe a half-hour break in between. And sometimes we went to his house because he had a babysitter. I forgot already. And I remember we learned all of Nidarim and part of Avodah and part of Ksubas today. I didn't do much contributing, but just saying so over the years, Baruch Hashem, had a strong relationship with him.
You became principal at MTA. Was that
somewhat
strange to be the principal of your old school?
Yeah. So I was teaching. I very much loved teaching, and I had Baruch Hashem some atzlacha. Eventually, when I needed to make more money, I had to stop teaching only half a day. So I actually taught history, American history and world history in the afternoon, to supplement my income. And actually, it's interesting because when I first started teaching, I was teaching Yeshiva High School in Deal, New Jersey, a large Sephardi population. I was teaching there. Even there, when I first went there, I taught only half a day. And but I couldn't come back to YU, too far away, to learn in the afternoon. So I learned in the afternoon in the deal Kollel over there. There was a Kollel there. I learned what YU was learning. I had a friend who was also in the same boat, so we learned why we didn't know what they were learning, but that was an experience. But eventually I had to take on more teaching responsibilities, and I enjoyed it. And eventually I left beyond. I was teaching in Torah Academy in Teaneck. Again, I was
TBC.
teaching. Yeah, it wasn't called TBC in those days. It was called Torah Academy of Teaneck. We're just playing Torah Academy. Started out as a Chavetz Chaim affiliate.
Right.
It was no longer Chavetz Chaim affiliate in my time, but it wasn't called TBC then. I forget already. Because I think it was just called Torah Academy. And so I was teaching there. And then I had heard that the principal of MTA was leaving and they were looking for a new principal. And I didn't have a Havamina to apply for them. I wasn't really interested in administration. I enjoyed teaching. And one fine day, I got a call from one of the rebbeim at MTA, Rabbi Kamenetsky, who later himself moved to become principal of the DRS. But he knew me. He grew up in Teaneck. I used to babysit for him, believe it or not. But anyway, he was on the Rebbe's committee, whatever, the search committee, Rebbe representative. And the rebbeim were not so happy, whatever. I don't know. I have no idea who they brought in as potential candidates. But they weren't so happy. So he said, the rebbeim keep saying no to this and no to that. No, they want to know, well, who do you people recommend? So he asked me, can we throw your name into your hat into the ring? I said, okay. I didn't expect it. And then presto, they offered me the job, much to my surprise. So I became principal of MTA for several years. My first time around, my first tour of duty as principal of MTA, head of school. And Baruch Hashem, it was a tumultuous time because there was a talk of closing the high school down at that time. More than talk, YU people wanted to close the high school down, so we stopped it. Whatever, I was involved in that, and then parted company after that. I did what I could to save the yeshiva. Several rebbeim in the college were helpful in that regard as well. But the high school was saved. And then I went somewhere else and I had an opportunity to start my own yeshiva high school. You attended. Okay. That high school lasted for 7 years. So, 6 years. 6 years.
I was the third and final graduating class.
Okay, 6 years.
It was open long enough.
I guess 1 year was a setup.
A setup. One was open long enough for me to graduate.
Long enough for you to graduate. So
the
6 years in the SIFT of North Jersey. And when that closed, I was offered to come back to YU in the JSS and IBC. So I taught there. And then the high school, again, needed a new principal. Before that, they asked me to come back and teach in high school. I much preferred teaching to doing administrative work. I really like being in the classroom. And I always felt it was very important for a successful administrator to be a teacher as well. I felt that you want to be a good administrator and work with your staff and so on. You got to be in the classroom too. Can't be there all day. Understood. You have other responsibilities, but you should have, your feet should be wet in the classroom as well. So that's why I was able to do that, all those years. Anyway, so I was teaching in high school. And again, the principal decided he was leaving. I did not apply for the position. I was interested. I was very happy teaching part of the time in JSS and part of the time in MTA this year. And I was also, at that time, working for Art School, translating the Yerushalmi. I was involved in translating the Yerushalmi in Zroim. So, whatever, I had those jobs. I was very, very satisfied with that. I still remember apparently they weren't able to find somebody that they wanted, whatever the issues were. I wasn't involved at all in that process. And at that time, President Joel, was the president of YU. And it was on Yom HaAtzmaut. They called me up to his office. And there was a barbecue outside. They still have the barbecues outside. So he called me up to his office. And I had a sneaking suspicion he was not calling me up just to ask me if I thought he should say halal or not. I realized he asked me, we take over the high school. We need you for a year just to transition, So I said, okay. 5 years later, after being, again, the head of school at MTA and Baruch Hashem being successful and still doing a little bit of teaching and so on, he called me up a second time and offered me to be a Rosh Yeshiva here in RIETS. I was not expecting that either. It was completely out of the blue and dream position, literally a dream position. So I said yes. And they're ready to have a different principal come into the high school. And so I've been there.
You stayed involved in the high school.
Right. So they asked me if I wouldn't be the head of school anymore, but I'd still be the Rosh Yeshiva of the high school. What does that mean? It means I'm around if they have shilas and issues. Some administrators would take counsel with me, still do. If there are issues that have to be brought to halachic authorities, if I couldn't pass it myself, I would be the one to bring it to Rav Shechter, whatever it may be. And I daven with the boys every day, and I give once a week a voluntary chabura to boys after davening. And if the Rebbe is out, for a day or two, so I substitute for the shir. On other occasions, I go into classrooms on issues. Sometimes the general studies teacher will ask me to come and speak about evolution and and halacha. Or I go into several shiurim before the Super Bowl to speak about gambling halacha. Rebbeim asked me to come in for that. Sometimes I've been invited to history teachers to come in and talk about studying Christianity and so different types of issues. So officially, I'm the Rosh Yeshiva of the high school still. So I still have involved in high school. I don't run the day-to-day operation, which I did my time for that quite a number of years, Baruch Hashem. But thank God.
Why do you consider the dream job the teaching here in the yeshiva?
What could be better? You have Talmidim who are serious. I teach smicha students, so the serious students, they want to learn Talmud Torah. I remember, I forgot exactly when it was. Maybe you remember. We had a family discussion. Maybe other people also. Just went around the table asking what your dream, something like that. No, what's your
icebreaker?
Huh? It's an icebreaker, right? Yeah. If a family member's over, what would be your dream job? It came to my turn. I said, I have it. It's my dream job. To be able to learn and prepare shiurim on a high level, and for Talmidim more interested in learning, what can be better? It's what I always wanted. I have a shul in Teaneck, small shul, Shabbos and Yom Tov only. It's not a weekday shul. But I give a number of shiurim on a regular basis there also, so I have to prepare shiurim there. Everybody knows that nowadays, everything's about source sheets. People expect source sheets. So as you well know, give you a shout out for helping me organize the source sheets on the computer and so on. Learned how to do it myself, but so I like to give out sheets and explore issues thoroughly. But to be able to teach people interested in learning, that's what I consider a dream job. And being here in YU, here in our yeshiva, but again, my rebbeim are here. Shechter's Shlita is here. Again, I mentioned, of course, Willig was a rebbe here. I was not a talmid of his per se, although I have a relation with him over the years. Baruch Hashem. Willig, Rosenzweig, and Rabbi Neuberger were again a little older than I am, but I remember from their student days. Rabbi Tversky is around my age. I remember when he came to the yeshiva, so I was still learning here. So, and now seeing a younger generation come through, it's really I'm leaving people out, but really it's it's a great privilege to me to be. I consider this my home, in many ways. I mentioned before that Rabbi Cohen, Yitzhak Cohen Shlita was my 9th grade rebbe, and I had a relation over the years. He was an aide under my chuppah, he was under your chuppah. So I had a relation with him over the years. So some people know I suffered a stroke a couple of years ago. Baruch Hashem, it didn't impact my head or my mind. My left side of my body was paralyzed for a little while. Baruch Hashem, I had a full recovery. Very moving for me. I really believe that the tefillas that were said in this base message, the high school base message, are helpful. They added on, we call it 10 or 15 minutes to the night seder. Which was tremendously important. I spoke when I came back, you remember. But I got a call when I was in the rehab center, Rabbi Cohen. And I saved it. I think it's still on my phone to this day. Mm-hmm. It was a vintage Rabbi Cohen. Yeah. And he said, you're in a hospital now. That's not your makom. That's not your makom. Your makom is here in the yeshiva. Your makom is here in the base measures. That's your makom. Run over here. Get over here as fast as you can. Never mind if you get a speeding ticket. I'll pay the speeding ticket. Speed back to the yeshiva. This is your makom. And again, it was a very typical kind of Rabbi Cohen remark. But that's really a field. This is my home. And the truth is, my father, your grandfather, this was his home too. When he came over from Europe after the war, he came to MTA as a high school student, 11th grade. The whole YU was that building. The high school, high school was one institution from 9th grade through the Rav Shir. And there was one administrator before my time, Mr. Abrams. He's the administrator. I never met him, but he was, he did cheer place from 9th grade to the Rav Shir. It was one operation. And that's where my father, your grandfather, lived. He had no place. He came over from Europe as a war refugee. And like many times, he wasn't the only one by far by that situation. and Yeshiva took care of him. And then he came back. He was a professor here for more than 40 years. And so it was his home too. And so even growing up, I would come here from time to time. The big thing that, I mentioned before, Teaneck had no kosher restaurants. So going to the YU Caf for dinner, that was a night out. That was a kosher restaurant. It wasn't that far away from Teaneck. That's where we went. And not infrequently. And we weren't the only ones. It was people from New Jersey and from Washington Heights, of course. There were a couple of restaurants like delis here in Washington Heights at that time. But coming to the YU Caf was a dinner destination those days. So, some little boy, I would be walking here, and this is my father taught, and so that's my home, and I feel that it's a great privilege, and Baruch Hu took care of me,
Any other external things you've drawn chinuch from in your life, and the last
so again, the main chinuch from my rebbeim, Baruch Hashem, and again, I consider it a great privilege that I learned by the Rav, and have the opportunity now to write up some Yeshurim, to have learned by Rav Lichtenstein's Chabad. It's a unique personality. Of course, to be close to Shechter, that's my main inspiration. I do have a little bit of a Chassidish bent. As you know, we are descendants of the Baal Shem Tov, direct. So, have some Chassidish interest, Chassidish blood, and Chassidish interest, and so I developed a relationship over the years with the Munkacher Rebbe, Shlita, or Rabinovich, the Munkacher Rebbe. And so I go to him every Sukkot, each night of Chalamoyt, the Simchas Beis Yeshiva. You've accompanied me many, many times. And
you have a makom there.
I have a
reserved seat.
Pretty big makom there, right near the front. One of the few people there, not wearing a shtreimel, don't have a beard, but and I visited him besides on Sukkot. I find it inspirational to be there on Sukkot. I enjoy, I have mentioned I have a shul in Teaneck, and I'm the Rav of the shul, so it's my job to inspire people. And Yom Naraim, I'm also the Chazan, Bal Musaf, and Ma'ariv and Nila and Yom Kippur, and so on. So, so when I go on Sukkot, I want someone else to inspire me in that sense, that type of inspiration, outside the realm of learning. He's a Talmid Chacham, he knows how to learn also. He learned the Tells, actually, learned the Litvish Yeshiva. It's a story of another time, but but he has the Litvish Yeshiva training in terms of learning. But he's Talmid Chacham, and I enjoy his Divrei Torah. He says Divrei Torah, not just Chassidish Torah, that too, obviously, but he actually, his grandson, of course, the Minchas Elazar, and a great grandson of Darkei Tshuva. Darkei Tshuva wrote on Yoredeya, and if you want to know anyone ever said on Yoredeya is in the Darkei Tshuva. He quotes everything, up to his time, obviously. And the Minchas Elazar wrote the addition, continued from where, with Darkei Tshuva left off on some parts. We didn't finish everything either. So not long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, this Moshe Leib Rabinovich, the present Munkacher Rebbe, finished right the next one, the Dharma Shul. So I was there, he gave me a copy of it. Shout out to Shechter, so I have a relationship with him. I get some inspiration from there also. So those are.
Any message you'd want to share with Talmidim about maximizing their learning, their time here, their tzlacha?
So again, I think that the right word is maximizing your time here. Maximizing your time. You have to take the Siddharim seriously. Okay, as I mentioned, I had, when I was a little older, even before I was married, I had a job, okay, that took me away, but I never was Mevantel Siddharim. Okay, when there was a Seder, there was a Seder. And I started, one of the things that, I don't know if they still have it, in terms of minyanim. There was a late minyan, there was an 8 o'clock minyan in one of the dorms, I think, in the morgue dorm. It was tent 8, I think. Tent 8 was the latest minyan at that time. It was known as the executive minyan, because that was the executives who could sleep late, could go to the executive minyan. I was involved in starting the post-executive minyan. As I mentioned, I used to drive a carpool, so we had a minyan at 10 after 8, 5 or 10 after 8. And guys used to come, and I don't think the yeshiva loved it that much, but Rabbi Reichman, who I mentioned earlier, used to come to that minyan. So that kind of legitimized, and we davened in the room next to the morgue lounge. Right. And sometimes the Rav, when he stayed in the apartment, used to come to that minyan. Also. Not always, but sometimes he came. They couldn't really abolish that minyan. But I will tell you, Seder started at 9 o'clock. We daven at 8:10. We finish around 5 to 9. Well, a little earlier than non-Kriya Torah. I was in the Seder at 9:00. Okay, I need breakfast. I had breakfast later, whatever it was. I felt it's very important to keep to Sidorim. Okay, at 9:00, 9:05 is also, but I mean, not to come wandering in late. Okay, even though I was not, as I said before, an official member of the Kollel. Okay, and I'm married already, I had children already. I came on Sundays. It was Kollel Seder from 1 to 5:30. It still is 1 to 5:30, 1:30 to 5:30. I came. Maximize your time. And guys should not be in a rush to get out. Okay, and I don't mean just in terms of the hours per day, but to be done with the yeshiva. Well, I get credit tonight to so credit tonight to be out here in a year and a half. I know they're changing now. They've changed requirements and residence requirements. Well, it's good. You're here. Make it a real plan. There's no rush. Most of the time, there's no rush to get out. You're never going to have as great learning as when you're in the yeshiva. That's the reality. The reality is you're never going to have learning where you really can just be Rosh Yeshiva in whatever sugyas you're learning and so on. It's not going to happen. Life gets busier. Okay, things come up. Baruch Hashem, people have families and children. There are, Rabbi Feldman, Daniel Feldman, younger than I am, but we have an uncle, my wife's uncle, Rabbi Shulman, Queens, a big Talmud Chacham, big Bucky, and Rabbi Feldman published his first sefer in Hebrew, so he asked me, I wrote Ha'aretz, which he subsequently published in the second volume. Okay, we also had Ha'aretz from Rabbi Shulman, who had a relationship with him, and Rabbi Shulman begins by writing, I can't give you as many Ha'aretz as I would like to because his expression is Dvarim HaMeshunim HaGozlim Es Hazman. Strange things that steal your time away, but that's life. That's life. When you're in the yeshiva, be in the yeshiva. If you're in a college, you have to do your college work, and I took my college work seriously, reasonably seriously. I found you go to class. I have to admit, I was a history major. I didn't do all the readings as I should. I have to admit, I did many of them, but I knew all of them. But I always came to class. I took good notes, and I was part of. I took it seriously. Whatever you do, you have to take seriously. You don't do things half-baked, because you do your general studies half-baked. Eventually, you do your Moriah College half-baked too. It's a bad habit to get into. You take things seriously, but you work it out and organize your time effectively. There's nothing like time. So in terms of learning, I tell a Talmidim, when you're a smicha also, you have zmanim, or don't make those zmanim. You have other things, but don't do things in a sloppy way. Don't do things in a sloppy way. Keep things serious. And the other message I have for people who want to go into chinuch. We need people to go into chinuch. Okay, we can't. There are not enough good mechanchim, and especially elementary school. And it shouldn't be viewed as a bizayon to teach elementary school. You're planting seeds, and those are neshamas that need good people. I know a couple of Talmidim who actually went into elementary school teaching. Very important. It's not a bizayon. Unfortunately, as a community, we don't regard rebbeim in general, but certainly not elementary school rebbeim with the greatest esteem, and it's wrong. And you can really, in some ways, have tremendous impact on a young man or young woman too. When you're teaching elementary school. But I tell mechanchim, if you think you're going to go into chinuch because that way I can stay in learning, and I'll keep my same siddharim. I'll still learn Choshen Mishpat. I'll still learn Kodshim. By the way, I'll also prepare my kids. After all, kids in 6th grade or kids in 10th grade, he's learning Chumash, Rashi, Bash Kedoshim. I know it by heart anyway. Doesn't work like that. You have to prepare, depending on the level. But you have to prepare, even if you're low level, then you have to prepare ways to. May not have to prepare the material the same intensity because you know the material. You have to prepare how to present it, how to share it. And from your life, I know from my life, I mentioned my rebbeim had tremendous impact on me. And I've said since elementary school as well. Okay, they were serious, serious people, and they wanted to teach, and they molded my personality. And that's really, I always like to refer to, we throw the word chinuch around. Chinuch means, how do you translate chinuch? Education, training, different words, right? The truth is a Rashi, okay, which tells us that the word chinuch really means ches nun chav. Rashi in Parshas Lecha, when he rallies the troops to go rescue Lot, So Vayorek es chanichov. Okay, and I believe it's there that Rashi says chanichov means people that he. What does the word shoresh ches nun chaf mean? It means to make something or someone suitable in the role that it or he is going to ultimately fill. So that's why we have Chanukas on Mizbeach,
Right.
The Minchas Chinuch, the Kohen, the initiated, okay? And that's really what Chinuch is. You're molding somebody into the role that he or she, as well also, is going to fill in life. And that's what a mechanech does. When it says Chanoch l'nar pidarko, so everyone knows that part of the pasuk. The second half of the pasuk says Gam ki yazken losim memeno. Okay, when you get older, you won't leave from it. What's the it? Chanoch l'nar pidarko usually means the derech. The derech you tell Chanoch l'nar pidarko. Gam ki yazken losim memeno. You won't leave that. But some say it refers to the derech of the child, not what you teach him. Chanoch l'nar pidarko, because that's the personality of the kid. He's going to grow up and have the same personality. Say this about you, your siblings, and any parent will say about their children. Certain aspects of a child's personality are the same when they're 5 years old and same when they're 35 years old. Certain things don't change. And so a good mechanech has to see how am I molding this kid in accordance with his or her ability. And that's that's a test. That's a malacha. And we have Baruch Hashem success. The truth is the same when dealing with smicha students. But okay, when dealing with smicha students, they're older, often they're married, they have a life path set for themselves, and so they're really presenting more information. And we want to, they got to know halacha, and they got to know the material. We have a robust smicha program now that I'm privileged to be part of. But again, you're molding people, and students have to feel they have to have a relation with the Rebbe, that they feel they can go to that Rebbe forever. That's what I had. I mentioned my high school rebbeim with my chasana. Okay, my college rebbeim, I still have. Still have a relation with those that I can. I think that's also very important.
Thank you, Rabbi Taubes, for joining this interview, and
okay.
Everyone a good day.
I was going to say I have the tremendous hakaras to go to Yeshiva, and it's a privilege to be part of it. So it's going on here. Hashem to continue it out.
Amen. Thank you.